threat from uptown. You know my sound is major. I know you like the lyrics, kid, so just do me a favor. Tell the tech to turn my dad up. This is a fact cut. Hey, yo, don't back up, because I wanna dive in and swim in the mentals where your thoughts roam. I wanna make you know my home, therefore you'll never be alone. But when you hear my song, sing along with the rhythm, cause I got big and fat beats that I give them. Yes, it's the ears and I'm checking out the blonde one. Maybe I can have one, maybe I can con one. Chill, I'm one with God, brothers, it's hard to stay straight until you're scared straight, and then you can't wait to get out.
Oh, well, winter's here. It was snowing today. And I've got just the bizarrest looking sky outside right now. It's completely overcast, completely gray, and the sun is just going down, and the whole sky is like a bizarre pinkish purple. It's just interesting. I don't know what the heck it is, but I don't know that I've seen this that many times in my life. So you're listening to The 100th Monkey with Tom and Ramon, and I'm here in Washington, and we are finally getting a little bit of snow here. Ramon, were you supposed to get some the other day too?
I got some yesterday. Today we're recording this on my Tuesday, Tom's Monday. And,
January 14th.
Oh yeah, it's January 14th. Oh, I gotta call some people to say happy birthday. But anyway, yeah, it was snowing here, but it's starting to melt now. Snow is falling off of people's house and it makes these huge sounds. But,
so how much did you guys get?
I'm not sure. Probably like 3-4 inches.
Oh wow,
yeah, it was a lot, but it's melting pretty fast. So
yeah, I'm jealous. Yeah, here in Western Washington, we get the 1 or 2 snowstorms a year that actually put some snow on the ground that'll cover the roads and everything, but majority of the time when it snows here, it spits in the morning or overnight, and then it's gone by lunchtime. So
yeah, here we get like once, maybe twice a year snow. It's in this part of Japan, but on the western side it snows a lot. We're protected by the mountains.
So our guest tonight probably doesn't have to deal with snow a whole lot.
No, I don't think so. But just to let you guys know, for those of you listening on YouTube, make sure you check out our website, www.the100thmonkeyradio.com. And for you regular listeners and anybody new, don't forget we also have a Tuesday show on True Frequency Radio Network. And that's every Tuesday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And our next guest would be Dr.
No, next show there. We haven't decided. Oh, no, that's.
What are you talking?
Who's on the 22nd?
The 22nd is Michael Tellinger, but
no, Michael Tellinger is the 29th.
The 15 is Dr. Gibson.
Yeah. Well, who's the 22nd?
22nd.
Okay, we'll figure out.
Jeff Harvey
later.
Is the 22nd.
Oh, that's right, Jeff Harvey. He's
Let's stick to this week, Tom.
He's coming up on Tuesday. Yeah.
Not this Tuesday. Oh yeah, by the time you listen to it.
Ramon, come on, we're time traveling here.
Okay.
You got it?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
but
anyway,
we are
you can
professionals. You guys know we are professionals, right?
You can listen to those archives, and you can catch us also on Facebook. I always post what shows are coming up and who's coming up then, and I always post videos and stuff like that. You can check out Tom's YouTube channel. That's all on the website. If you scroll down, you can also see past guests. And also, if you have a story of your own, things you've been experiencing, we'd love to hear about it. So you can email us at info@the100thmonkeyradio.com.
Yeah, I want to plug John Kelly's UFO AM today. He's still doing that every day, Monday through Friday at 7:00 in the morning Pacific. That's actually, I've said this before on the show, that fantastic resource if you guys want to know what's currently happening day by day in the UFO woo-woo world. John's going to talk about it, so you can find him on. We have a link right there on our main page for him.
It is the first and only daily UFO news, so it's really good. There's a lot of news that he puts up I never hear about.
Did you see that Alfred Lambert Weber is doing one on Fridays now too?
Oh, is he?
Yeah, he's doing
some of them.
Yeah, he's doing a UFO news thing too. So that's kind of cool. I mean, that's something that hasn't. That's cutting edge. That's new stuff out there. Nobody's done this yet.
Yeah. So before you introduce our guest, I want to give big thanks to everybody over at the Shadowland because we were introduced by this guest through them. So just want to say big thank you.
From the Shadowland, right? Is that
Shadow. What did I say? Shadow.
You said Shastaland? I was like, where's Shastaland?
I didn't say Shastaland. I said Shadow something. Oh. Anyway, yeah.
Shadowland Voyagers. They're on Truth Frequency every Sunday night at 5 o'clock.
Yeah. I wanted to add into that. There's a lot of people who I've heard that are having Kundalini experiences or other spiritual experiences, and they get locked up for several weeks in psychiatric wards, or I've had a few friends that are bipolar and or schizophrenic, and they tend to be very psychic, and some of them are semi-telepathic. I mean, they'll pick thoughts right out of your head, especially when they're in that state. So this guest is, really puts things together. So I really, really enjoyed. So Tom?
So tonight we've got Sean Blackwell. Since discovering the relationship between spiritual experiences and bipolar disorder, Sean Blackwell's produced over 40 videos on this subject for his YouTube channel, Bipolar or Waking Up. And together with his wife, a transpersonal psychologist, he is building relationships with the psychiatric community in his country, Brazil, where they hope to create a healing center for people struggling with experiences in non-ordinary states of consciousness. During his self-help seminar, advertising executive Sean Blackwell entered into a state of ecstasy so powerful he thought he had died and was headed for heaven. However, rather than being saved by God, Sean was arrested, handcuffed, and shipped to a psychiatric hospital where he was restrained and forcibly medicated during a brief but traumatic stay. Once released, Sean rejected any possibility that he had a mental disorder. Instead, he began a search for the deeper meaning of his abrupt awakening. This may have been the best decision he's ever made. His endless career struggles disappeared as his once mundane life blossomed into one of success, adventure, and intensity. It took a decade for Sean to finally discover that his once-in-a-lifetime blessing was actually quite common, but that those who experience it are usually diagnosed with bipolar disorder. His website is www.bipolarorwakingup.com, and he's got a book by the same name, which you will be able to find all the links on the show page. Thank you for joining us, Sean. How are we doing tonight?
Hi, Tom. I'm doing pretty good. Hey, Ramon.
So, I heard you on the Shadowline Voyagers, and I have a close connection with that radio show.
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Yeah. And very close. She's sitting right behind me. But
that's close. That's close.
I was totally I was hooked when I heard you talking about and explaining your experiences, because I had quite a few similar experiences. So you started out. Tell me where you started out at. You started out going for the advertising stuff and the executive type lifestyle, and going that direction with your life.
Yeah, I guess when I came out of university, I was one of those people that once you graduated and you still didn't know what you wanted to do. I was that kind of person. And all through university, I was basically studying religion in a variety of ways, especially through sociology. And I got into the advertising business because it works with ideas, and religion worked with ideas. And I don't know, I was just always attracted to ideas. But once I was in that business, I had a cold feeling even from the beginning. It seemed like the only way I could find to make a living. And I stuck with it for a while, but it was just very frustrating, and I wasn't particularly happy. And so after 4 years in just sort of being frustrated in that business, I took a self-help seminar called the Landmark Forum. And that's sort of what started to catapult me into another dimension, you might say.
The Landmark Forum. Now, I'd never heard of this group before reading your book. What were they all about?
Geez, what were they all about? I think the funny thing about the forum, and it's grown quite a lot. It's sort of become a global kind of self-help seminar. They're very successful and very controversial, but they really started out I think it was in the 1970s as what was called EST training at the time, and they just took this very confrontational approach to you getting to deal with your issues. But I guess maybe what was different about it was that they came at you in a very intense way. And the self-help seminar I took was 3 days of 12-hour sessions where they introduce you to a lot of different ideas. And it sort of wears down, you might say it wears down your ego or your conception of yourself. And so that they believe that instead of going to a therapist, say once a month or once a week for the rest of your life and you don't see much change, they feel like it's their job to get you to really transform within a very short period of time, like a 3 or 4 day period. And when you go in there, you're really sort of skeptical and you don't believe it. But in my case, I sort of got more than what I bargained for, I'd say.
Oh, so what actually happened? It sounds like it's one of those things that when you go in, they're just trying to take down the walls that society's placed up around you to try to reach down into your core a little bit.
Yeah, it's exactly that. They kind of say that, you live in a crazy society and we've only got 3 or 4 days to get your head on straight. And so that's why they're so intense. They kind of put it like that. And for me, it was more of a matter of getting me to see how I'm getting in the way of my own life, where I'm being a jerk, where I'm being an asshole, you might say, and getting me to see why I'm doing that and why it's more important to be right and to have other people see my way of being or to see things from my perspective, as opposed to preserving relationships, which was, where they believed life was really at, was in cultivating relationships. But we're so stuck in our opinions and our own way of doing things that our relationships get hurt, in a sense. And that was just one of many ideas that came to me at the forum that started to give me a sense of aliveness, a sense of, oh my God, I'm starting to understand things that I never understood before. That's what started. And then just to continue, I guess it was. I started to look at that. I started to look at, relationships in my own family, especially with my mother, where I had realized that I had a lot of emotional repression in my own personal background. There was some coldness in my relationship with my mother as well. And then the next day of the course, there was a meditation that we did, a very short meditation of about 5 minutes. And in that meditation, which was on fear, I felt a punch in my heart. I felt this really strong punch, and I started to cry, and with that punch, everything sort of changed. I started to slip into what you might say another dimension.
So
I'm getting a lot of air feedback, sort of a sizzling feedback. I'm not sure where it's coming from. It just popped up out of nowhere.
Oh boy, that's probably my end. I'm sitting right next to a noisy computer. Okay,
just to clarify that's coming.
Okay, I've never heard it come through the audio, so we should be good.
Okay.
So your walls started crumbling, and the standard operating procedure that most of society operates on, which is I am right and you can't say anything to prove me wrong, started going out the door, and you started doing the review. And then as this meditation kind of kicked, was it your do you feel like it was now you're familiar with chakras and all that sort of thing, so
right.
Was it like one of the chakras blasting off at that point?
I think so. I didn't know anything about Kundalini experiences at the time, But I think I had maybe a few years earlier I had fallen in love and felt something open in my heart area just a few years earlier, and that relationship went nowhere. But I did have that sort of feeling in my heart area, and this was like a really strong punch at the heart, which could have been a heart chakra opening. You know, I see it that way now. I didn't see it at the time, but now that I've learned, I see it that way, and it brought up a lot of fear that had been related to a scuba diving accident I had had about 2 years earlier, or not 2 years earlier, 2 months earlier. I was living in Vancouver, just moved back to my hometown of Toronto, but back in Vancouver I had had this scuba diving accident where I very easily could have died. I lost my weight belt at about 90 feet below sea level and went shooting to the surface, and I could have died of an air embolism, or I could have drowned, or from just panic, or what was the other thing that can happen to you? Oh, or then you can have the bends.
The bends, right.
You can die from that as well. So it was quite a serious moment, which I was sort of in denial of at the time, and then in the middle of the course, all the feelings related to that, you know, traumatic episode surfaced. And with that, when all that came about, by the time it was done, I was sort of in a la la land place. I felt like I was sort of swimming in the universe, swimming again, you know, like in the ocean. And but all my senses heightened as well. And when I went home that night, you know, I could see detail in curtains I'd never seen before. I was listening to the comb go through my hair in a way I'd never heard. And when I turned the lights out at night, I just felt like I was surrounded in like a black chocolate, you know. It just seemed so beautiful. I was just sort of looking at the darkness in my own bedroom going, wow, like this is amazing.
Whole new world.
Yeah, I'm in a whole new place. And I was staying with my parents at the time, and they were starting to get worried. But I was like, I told them, I said, it's like I've been to heaven and now I'm back and you want me to act normal, you know. I didn't say it that way either. I was much more intense. I was very emotionally intense, crying a lot and being very transparent about things, and just sort of like, you know, the whole Jack in the Box thing. It was like the Jack was out of the box, you know.
Oh, so then that led into so that led into the next day, which was it the third day that everything really hit the fan? Or
no, it was pretty much the last day of the seminar, which was like a fifth day. It was a fifth day. There was 3 days, and then a break day, and then a final day. And I was at the final end seminar, and family members were there from people. And they're asking us if we needed to take any more courses, and they're asking us about if we had any questions. And I just felt like, wow, no, I understand everything. I understand more than I even thought when I would die. I thought this would be the understanding you get when you're dead. And then it hit me that, oh my God, I had died. I died in the scuba diving accident, and everything since then was a purgatory of some kind. And that's why I was in this other dimension. And the whole thing around me was sort of a charade, it was just sort of a theater for my own personal development, to help me move on to the next level, to move on to a nirvana or a heaven. And so once I had really come to the conclusion that I was dead, then I was in trouble. You know, then I was in trouble.
Were you getting like psychic or impressions and things that you felt like was coming from a higher source that was, you know, prodding you along or guiding you through this?
Yeah, I guess there was a part of me that was going, okay, just trust your intuition. Trust your intuition. That's what's going to take you where you need to go. And to make a long story short, I wound up in a neighboring ballroom completely alone, and I felt like, okay, well, what do I need to do? What do I need to do to go to heaven? And then I realized I needed to pee, and I was afraid to pee. You know, everybody's afraid to pee in a 5-star hotel ballroom, but then my intuition was just like, confront your fears. And they've been teaching us on the course to confront our fears. And so I just let it go. And so I'm peeing on the floor of the hotel. And then I'm like one of these Hindu sadhus who covers themselves in the ashes of dead people. I just got down in it. I got down in my own pee, and I'm laying there, and then I turn around and I'm like, I got my arms spread out like Jesus on the cross, and I'm just waiting to ascend to heaven. That's where I was at. My shirt was off at that time, and then I started to feel energies in my body again, leaving piece by piece. Parts of me, energetic, were starting to go to heaven. They were starting to ascend. I felt this ascension of different energies, to the point where when the energies leaving left my eyes, I thought I was going to be blind, and I threw my glasses away. I threw my glasses off, and but then I opened my eyes, and there they were. I could still see, and then I thought, wow, being dead is really strange. This is a very weird experience, being dead. And security guards came in, and they were black, and I thought, wow, black angels. I kind of never imagined angels being black security guards. This is different. This is hilarious, And I guess to make a long story short, many people came in and tried to manipulate me to put my clothes on, and that's the one thing I refused to do. And so they called the police, and the police came to tell me I could go to jail. They could take me to jail, or they could take me to the psychiatric hospital. And I told them that I was choosing peace. And I went to turn out the lights in the ballroom because I thought I was dreaming. And so for me to turn those lights out was very symbolic of, like, I was annihilating myself. I thought, well, this is how the final end happens, and I'm going to annihilate myself by turning out these lights. But they grabbed me before I had the chance to find out if I was right about the light switch. Two cops grabbed me and put me down on the ground and handcuffed me, and they had me on the ambulance stretcher pretty quick. And then I was going to the hospital, and I was still like, wow, this is the craziest way to get to heaven. I never imagined that getting to heaven with police escort and a hospital bed, and this is just wild, So I was kind of enjoying the whole thing, even though I'd been treated quite rough. It just all felt like part of the process,
Yeah, I had a sort of a similar experience as far as being, cuffed and strapped to a gurney and hauled off for 72 hours observation. But yeah, I didn't think I was going to heaven myself. I wasn't sure. I was this is what I told you. I had several experiences that I considered those spiritual emergencies, and this was one of them. And I know if I would have been in my third dimensional mind listening to me, I would have been a little worried too. But my wife at the time was scared and ended up calling the police on me, and they took me in for 72 hours of observation of some of the most interesting and amazing and intuitive and psychic experiences of my life with the people that were in the psychic ward. I'll call it the psychic ward at the Riverside Hospital in Southern California. It was amazing, absolutely amazing.
Yeah, interesting. And I think looking back, that everybody knows about paranoia when people are out to get you, and it's really like the universe is really conspiring to get you in a way. The universe is a scary place, but a lot of people, and in my situation, there's a term called like proanoia. I think that, or maybe pronia, which is like the universe is secretly conspiring in your favor. Like it's secretly conspiring to help you, and that's sort of what I was going through. And I know I'm not the only one. There's this pronia that can happen as well. So that's where I was at.
Right. Well, yeah, I definitely released my opposition to what was happening to me, and went with the flow, and knew that it was guided in some form or fashion. So, so where does the bipolar come in? I think we.
Okay. It's going to take me a second to get there. Okay.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, I figured out pretty quick that the universe, once I got into the hospital and I was forcibly injected, which was a very, that felt like rape. I had 5 people with their hands on me, and then and they lied to me. They said they weren't going to inject me if I stayed still, and then they really give me this needle in near my ass against my will. It's a rape situation. And after that, I started to figure out that maybe things aren't as they appear. But I did sleep. My brother came in and talked to me about considering getting some sleep, and I did. And when I woke up I guess it was about 24 hours later, I just realized that wherever I was, I needed to get out of the hospital. And so I just told them what they wanted to hear. I told them that I thought I'd been through a post-traumatic stress disorder and related to the scuba diving accident, but that I knew who I was and that I felt like I was okay to go home. And they released me after about 4 days, so I was quite lucky. I think many people in my situation could have been in the hospital for months, weeks at least. But I got home, and then I took some months to try and digest what happened to me, and I always felt that it was a spiritual experience. And fortunately, I had one friend who was a past life therapist as well, and she had come to talk to me, and over the months we would sort of get together, and I would start to just vent about what happened and where I see my life going. And about 6 months later, I went back to work, and things got a whole lot better because, the reason I took that seminar was I'd been, going through mild, moderate depression for the previous 4 years, and I had felt really trapped in my career. And after this, when I went back to work, my career just took off. I mean, I tripled my salary within about 3 years. I went back to work starting at $35,000, and then within 3 years, I was making $100,000 in Canadian dollars. It was just a skyrocketing career trajectory I took. But I still felt like I needed to get out, I needed to get out of that business. It just didn't feel right.
Real quick,
Go ahead.
Was the forum experience, do you attribute some of that plus the spiritual emergency to putting you in a new place to be able to go faster, go better with your career?
Yeah, well, part of their philosophy and what we were learning there. But, it was kind of, if you're going to say what was the key thing, it's kind of like one of those everything. Everything was important, scuba diving accident, career frustrations, being at the seminar, uncovering family issues, revealing my own emotional repression. And then in this whole, maybe the most important thing is that all of that took me to a place where I had what you might consider an ego death. There was a death of my own identity that I went through, and a rebirth where there was just so much of me that I just sort of felt died, and I was ready to sort of confront life in a much more open and transparent way, and not so afraid of what was going to happen, just much better prepared to just roll with what life was going to give me, roll with the punches in a way where in the past, I was a little more concerned and fearful with everything that might be coming up, and always strategizing and always wondering, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And now I was more prepared to go with the flow, and that's what happened. Jack,
so you started talking to your friend, what was her name, Sheena?
Sheena, that's right. And Sheena helped me put things in perspective. She was the only one who understood. She was actually from India, and when she had heard the details, she knew exactly what had happened to me. And she told me, you read it in the book. She said, Sean, now you're in this world, but you're not of it. That's the big difference. You're not so attached to the day-to-day life wow, this has to happen for me, or my life won't work out. I wasn't so involved in that day-to-day struggle, the rat race anymore. I was playing the game, but I was playing.
Right.
It wasn't a day-to-day struggle anymore, and life became a lot more fun and much more open. But I still had ways to go. I still had a ways to go, and so the job got a lot better. Like I said, I made a lot more money, and then I put as much of my money as I could into travel. And I had a dream where I was being called to Peru. And to make a long story short, a year later I went, and I did a lot of rituals with some Incan shaman down there. and met a lot of really interesting people. And one of those interesting people became my wife, and who was from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And that's where I live now. I live in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
Did you, through the shamanistic rituals that you did you ever do the entheogens down there?
No, I've never done any drugs in my life. I grew up with asthma, so when you have, most people, the sort of gateway for drug use or whatever is cigarettes. And for me, smoke in my lungs was just something I hated. So I was never one to go down the path of smoking cigarettes or smoking marijuana. And I had a passing curiosity with entheogens, and especially around that time in Peru, but my intuition kept telling me to stay away from it. And so I did. And to this day, I've never been high. I think I've tasted marijuana, but that's about it. But other than that, I can't say I've really I would say I haven't had a drug experience, Yeah.
Nice.
And so, I met my wife in Peru, and I went back to a job in Miami for a while. That didn't work out. We traveled Brazil together because she was from Brazil, and Brazil seemed really interesting to me, and went back to Miami to finish my career, and things didn't work out again. And to make a long story short, we moved to Brazil. It took a few years of going back and forth, but we moved to Brazil. And then 5 years into living here in Brazil, we got a phone call in 2007 that one of my nieces was starting to act strangely, and she had taken her blouse off in front of her father. And I thought, well, she's taking her clothes off. This sounds like what happened to me. And we went and worked with her, and I told my wife. She said, what should we do with her? And I said, just take everything that psychiatry does and just do the opposite, which means like connect with her, tell her everything's going to be okay, just really intimately connect with her and tell her everything's going to be fine. And but by the time we got to her, she had been medicated heavily already. But still, we worked with her, and 4 days later, she went back to the psychiatrist and a psychologist, and they both said that she had had the fastest recovery that they had ever seen for someone in her condition, even though she was being medicated. So we felt like we had accomplished something quite big.
Had they diagnosed her with bipolar at this point?
They were mentioning bipolar disorder at this point, and I didn't know what that was. But as we went, I thought that they would just take her off the medication because she was bouncing back, and that was it. But they didn't, and they recommended her to continue it for another 3 or 4 months, and I just went crazy. I was like, 3 or 4 months? What are they talking about? And so that got me researching, and then I went online and I started to do some YouTube videos about my experience, and I started to do online research about bipolar disorder. And I started to see that the spiritual experience that I'd had, which a doctor that I'd started to follow had called a spiritual emergency, Dr. Stanislav Grof, had mentioned about people having experiences similar to mine, people having very spiritual experiences, which are often mistaken for acute psychosis, which can be interpreted as schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. So I had always thought that, well, I had a spiritual experience. I didn't have a mental illness. That was something completely different. But then, my niece was labeled with bipolar disorder, and I went online to find out what that was. And eventually I realized that the symptoms were basically the same, except that when you're labeled with bipolar disorder, most of the time, if not all of the time, you're medicated for life. And when I found that out, for the previous 10 years, I'd always wanted to help people who had my condition, but I thought that my spiritual experience was like maybe a 1 in 10,000 experience. I thought I might never meet another person that had an experience like mine. And then I find out that pretty much, probably 80% of people who are labeled with bipolar disorder are having experiences similar to my own, and some very similar. And so that was just like I was hit by a train, and I felt like, wow, I just need to do something. I need to do something to save my niece, and I need to do something to help all these people who are being labeled, and they're not giving an alternative perspective.
So from there, you helped your niece, and she said they recovered, and did she relapsed, right?
Well, what happened was, it gets a little bit complicated because I had this younger niece that in the book I call her Anna, and she had this episode with us that was medicated by the doctors, and so we felt, or I felt like I needed to work with her some more. I wanted another chance. So I kept studying and studying online until after 4 months, I felt like I was ready to go to her parents and say, look, they're going to tell Anna that she needs to be medicated for life. So why don't you give us a shot? Let's take one more chance and see if we can get her off the medication and then work through these episodes instead of medicating them. But just as I was prepared to go back to her parents with this proposition, because she was still young at the time, she was only 17, 18, so it needed to be with her parents' permission. Her sister had just come back from Paris. She had been traveling and done a French immersion in Paris. Her sister had come back, met her younger sister, Anna. So Eliana, the older sister, met Anna. And then within a few days of being back home, Eliana, the older sister, went into crisis as well. She went into a non-ordinary state of consciousness. But this time, because she knew what happened to her younger sister, Eliana called us, and she came to us directly, and we supported her without calling her parents, without calling any doctors, without calling any hospital. We took care of her in our own apartment, and that made all the difference. She stayed with us for 3 days in our apartment, and she was in her own apartment for 2 days prior, and my wife had stayed with her there. We had been with her there. And so we didn't call her parents for 5 days. And then on the 5th day, we called and let them know what had happened. But by then, Eliana had already started to come around. She had already had a full night's sleep. She was a little bit scattered, but she was ready to go back to her parents in a more grounded state. So we had taken her through a full acute psychosis where, Eliana had tried to fly out our windows. She had taken all her clothes off. And she had even tried to jump out our window on about the 2nd day with us. And it was more of like when I tried to turn the lights out in the ballroom. It was more of a ceremonial kind of suicide she was trying to do. And she jumped right into my arms as if she was jumping out the window. And that was really the grounding process for her. After she jumped into my arms, she started to feel her pain receptors again. And she hadn't felt pain for the previous 4 days, So, yeah, she was in a full-blown psychosis. We took her through it, completely unmedicated. We called no doctors, no hospitals, and we were very successful, And that's when it was like, well, once we had that, then I was angry because I knew that the psychiatrists were not telling the whole truth, and something needed to be done. And I've become a lot more philosophical about the whole thing and about psychiatrists and psychiatry, in the previous 4 or 5 years. But at that time, I was angry. I was really angry at psychiatry because I felt like, I had a younger niece, Anna, who was going to be medicated for life because these guys didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
And I felt very validated in our ability to get her older sister, Eliana, through this process. And that's when I started making YouTube videos because I wanted everybody to know about this stuff. And yeah.
Right. So I think we've kind of pretty much covered the book now. That's kind of what I was shooting for, is getting the book covered out there and that experience that you've had. Now I want to start digging into what some of these aspects are. What exactly, just for those who may not really fully understand it, what is bipolar disorder?
Okay, well, to a certain extent, it depends on who you talk to, but I'll give you a little bit of history, okay? Back in the day, we might say in the 70s and the 60s, there was this thing called manic depression, okay? And with manic depression, people would feel very high and maybe make bad business decisions or spend too much money, feel overly sexual, or maybe just feel very grandiose, like they're the life of the party, that kind of thing. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. But manageable. They can still work, they can still function. That would be the mania side. And then they would have this mood swing where they would go from this feeling like they're all powerful and they could do anything to feeling very depressed, which I think most of us know about, a total lack of energy, in serious situations, a person might want to kill themselves. They might not shower. They might not, cleanse themselves. So you can have these huge swings in what's called manic depression. And then I think somewhere in the 80s, they started to call manic depression bipolar disorder, because you've got this bipolar aspect of the mania and the depression, okay? But then something funny happened. Schizophrenia was considered a completely different animal, okay? And schizophrenia had to do with a complete break with reality. That was really the insanity. No one really looked at bipolar disorder or manic depression as insanity. Schizophrenia was the insanity. And schizophrenia had different types of insanity. And one type was sort of just a general feeling of paranoia, for example, or feelings of hallucinations where you're being persecuted or things are chasing you. But still, that person in schizophrenia, they're quite a reserved person. They're kind of maybe even a lower energy person, the homeless person you see talking to themselves. That would be a person with schizophrenia, and often very fearful. But there was another type of schizophrenia, what they call the acute psychosis. And the acute psychosis was an experience where, for the most part, you had a fairly normal functioning person, someone who doesn't have a lot of problems in their background. They've always had friends. Maybe they're in university. You look at this person and you think, wow, this is a totally normal person. But then they go through some difficulties in their lives. Maybe their personality starts to change a little bit. And then all of a sudden, boom, they go into a totally non-ordinary state, which psychiatry interprets as insanity, okay? Now, when that happens, you can have people that go very paranoid, like they're convinced the FBI is after them. They could hallucinate as well. But they can also have these tremendously spiritual experiences where they might think that they're Jesus, or a king is possible, or some sort of Messiah or saint. They might want to write a new Bible. That happens to people. They might want to test reality. They'll think that they're dreaming. So they'll test reality by trying to walk through a wall, or it can even be very dangerous. They might want to try and walk out into traffic because they're hearing a voice that says God is telling them, trust me, and walk out into traffic. And they'll do that, and some people can have been hurt that way. And so you've got this other very powerful experience called this acute psychosis that used to be called schizophrenia, and sometimes it still is. However, for the most part, what's happening today, and which has been my surprise in my research online, is that when people are labeled with what's called bipolar 1, bipolar 1 usually starts with feelings of mania, high energy, euphoria, that slips into the acute psychosis where you start to think you're God, or you want to fly, or you're going to write a Bible, these kind of feelings, heightened sensory perceptions. Okay, that's the acute psychosis of bipolar 1. And then bipolar 2 is the manic depression, which is just the high and the low. Now they call bipolar 1 because you do have this florid acute psychosis and the religious experience, which once it gets medicated often ends up in depression. So you do have that manic depressive aspect. But what's really changed in the last 30 years or so is that acute psychosis, which was insanity or schizophrenia in the past, is now bipolar 1. And in my opinion, psychiatry has really glossed over this change because they're constantly saying, well, data for schizophrenia has been unchanged in the last 50 years. Only 1% of the population has schizophrenia. But what they don't mention is that there's been this re-diagnosis where people who used to be called schizophrenic are now being labeled with bipolar disorder. And the percentage of bipolar disorder cases has gone through the roof. For people under the age of 21, between 1993 and 2003, diagnosis of bipolar disorder has gone up 4,000%. 4,000%.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And overall, the percentage of people being admitted to psychiatric emergency has doubled in the last 10 years. So we're in an epidemic.
Yeah. We'll definitely get into some of the root causes for that, but And so, from your experiences with your nieces, they're nieces, correct?
Yeah,
For,
they're sisters. Yeah.
is that where you started coming up with this idea of developing some, or are you? I guess I should ask: are you developing some sort of protocol or guidelines for people to help deal with people going through spiritual emergencies?
In an indirect way, but my first step was I felt like I needed to sort of be the 100th monkey and open global consciousness. And so the first thing I did was I started putting up videos under the YouTube channel name Bipolar or Waking Up. And in those videos, I started to lay out key aspects of the theory from mainly Dr. Stanislav Grof about what he came to be called spiritual emergency, this sort of spiritual awakening that can look like a psychosis, and but that if it's supported in the right way, can go unmedicated, and the person can not only recover completely, but they can have a spiritual breakthrough like I did, where your life gets a lot better, you know. And so I decided to put up videos about the spiritual dimension of what was being labeled as bipolar disorder. So I was really doing an overlap there. I wasn't creating a difference between what's bipolar and what's spiritual. I was sort of saying, hey, you people who are being labeled with bipolar disorder, you guys are having spiritual experiences. And if you can recognize that, there's an opportunity to heal. You know, that was the first real step. You know.
So what are some of the flags that you have noticed, the commonalities that you've noticed in the differences between the actual psychosis and the spiritual experience?
Okay, that's a great question. And you know, one of the first things I learned online is that there is a lot of overlap, which makes this whole issue about what's insanity and what's spiritual very difficult, okay? But from what I've seen is that we've got a spectrum of experiences. And at one end of the spectrum, we have extremely loving experiences where you feel like the universe is trying to support you, like I did. You have heightened sensory awareness. You feel like you're getting messages from God, or that you're in a sort of, you're on a divine mission, a spiritual journey of a kind. You might feel that you're being tested by God. What else? You have a sense of knowingness, like you've been going through your life feeling like you need to know more. You never know enough to live your life to be happy, and you're always searching for answers. And then all of a sudden you have this aha moment, you know. These are some of the main characteristics. I've got some notes here. Maybe I can scroll down a little bit. Okay. And then if you do have fearful experiences, you tend to be able to maybe just sit with that fear a little bit more and just let it arise, you know. When they do come up. And these are all experiences, by the way, that have been identified by Dr. Stanislav Grof as part of spiritual emergency, but also by Dr. David Lukoff, someone who I'm working closely with these days. He's a co-president of the Association for Transpersonal Psychology, Dr. David Lukoff. I've just recently done a video for him that's on my site, and it's on his own. And all these criteria I've just mentioned are very common themes of spiritual experience, or also what's known as mystical experiences that may have psychotic features. Okay, now what are the psychotic features? The psychotic features are rooted in a sensation of fear that gets projected. So with psychosis, you tend to have paranoia. Like I said, police are after me, a microchip has been implanted in my brain, somebody is trying to poison my food, the person who's claiming to be my wife is not my wife. And so there's this general look at the universe, that the universe is after you, you know, this kind of thing. And then when there are hallucinations, as opposed to spiritual experiences where the hallucinations tend to be more abstract and maybe visions of light or perhaps visions of angels, that can happen. With the darker, fearful experiences, you have more concrete experiences of voices telling you that you're a bad person, that you should kill yourself, that you could kill other people, or hallucinations of devils or very scary creatures like maybe Freddy Krueger or something like that. And these paranoid hallucinations tend to be very realistic. Like somebody could be sitting down at your dinner table and you think that they're there just like anybody else, you know. They often are very persecutory, demonic, and quite scary. And so that's the other end of this spectrum, okay? But what's complicated is that there's no real place where you can separate the two. It's like being on a beach, where at one end of the beach, it's fabulous. The water's perfect, the people are all gorgeous, and the sun is clean and not littered at all. And then at the other end of the beach, it's all criminals and people with bad hygiene, and they're mean to each other, and the sand is full of broken glass and pollution and cigarettes, and the water's polluted and the water's rough. But where's the division between the two ends? There really isn't any. It's just that the beach goes from being terrible to gradually getting better until it's really pristine, you know.
Right.
And that's what these experiences in psychosis are like, you know. I know I'm going on a little bit here.
No, that's fine. There's no real firm dividing line that you can really use to delineate with.
Not really, but the ends of the spectrum are as different as black and white, you know.
Yeah. So, are there any telltale signs? So, if somebody comes across, you know, or has a friend that they suspect is going through one of these experiences, you know, any telltale signs that you've noted that would lean you one direction or the other?
Yeah, well, to start, you know, it's been a big surprise to find out that when people suffer from what gets normally labeled paranoid schizophrenia, there's often a lot of abuse and family troubles in the lives of these people. A lot of them, recent research in the last 10 years has shown that there's a very high relationship between sexual abuse and schizophrenia. Some estimate, you know, 80% of people with who have been sexually abused suffer from hallucinations. You know, like, this is a huge statistic, and it's just being researched now, I think, to a large extent because society has been afraid to ask that question, you know. But they're starting to go at it now. So often the typical profile of someone suffering from a real serious disorder that's very difficult to treat and may be dangerous to leave unmedicated is someone who's had an extraordinarily difficult family background. From that, they've had a history of relationship problems as well. You know, that it's the loner. It's people who've never been able to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. People who've really struggled to hang on to relationships. You know, that kind of person. And then their psychosis or their hallucinations or paranoia tend to start earlier in life, you know, like 14, 15, 16 years old. That person tends to have an experience that looks a lot more like what we've come to know as mental illness. And it's much more difficult to treat for a couple of reasons. One, the experience itself is much more disturbing because it's so fearful. But also these people, they don't have the psychological development to deal with it. They just don't have the tools because they've been inhibited by what's happened to them, you know. And this is a controversial thing to say, but this is what my research online and my secondary research through the psychiatric journals and psychology journals has shown me in recent years, you know. The other end of the spectrum tends to be a person who is quite well developed. They've gone through the passages of society. They went through grade school without a problem. They went through high school without a problem. Maybe they were too perfect in a sense. A lot of emotional repression tends to be behind people who have these episodes that are easier to treat. A lot of emotional repression. They do have problems. Maybe mom or dad was a little bit cold or difficult to deal with. Maybe there was some coping strategies with marijuana or other drug experiences, but usually not to the addictive level. Maybe just a mild experimentation or an infrequent use, maybe perhaps at parties, and that's about it. And then, but the telltale sign is that, so along with this sort of quite normal background, you have them going through a period in their life of rapid change that's very difficult for them to deal with. You know, and so a typical case is going to university, where they've left all their friends behind, they've moved to a new city, there's these high expectations from their parents who've paid for this university. Then they get there, they're exposed to new ideas, they're exposed to people from maybe different religions or different belief systems than what they grew up with. And then maybe they start to fail in university. You know, their first grades are disappointing. They were straight A students, and now they're getting Fs, and they don't know how to deal with it. They're smoking more marijuana than they used to, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're into an episode. You know, that tends to be someone towards the more optimistic end of the spectrum, and that person tends to have more of a mixed episode, but leaning towards the spiritual side. And many people like that identify a lot with my videos. They see my videos and they go, "That's what happened to me." You know? Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we have quite a bit more to dig into here. So we are at the top of the hour, and that went pretty damn fast. And I didn't hear Ramon once. Are you still there? Are you asleep, Ramon? Or
You live, Ramon? Is this thing on?
hello, Ramon? I wonder if I lost him and just didn't realize it. So,
All right. Well,
anyways, we're going to take a short. We're going to take a short break here, Sean. And if you would put out your website and where people can pick your book up at.
Oh, sure. It's www.bipolarourwakingup.com. Okay. You can access all my information there, bipolarourwakingup.com. And my book is called Am I Bipolar or Waking Up? By me, Sean Blackwell. Am I Bipolar or Waking Up? And it's only available on Amazon or Kindle. Okay, Amazon.com or Kindle.
Great. We have the links for that on this page for the show on the www.the100thmonkeyradio.com website. So also, if you're listening to this on YouTube, look down in the comments below and you can find the links there also. Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for listening to this first segment, and if you are not a member yet, I would urge you to click that Join Now button and help support Ramon and I and the 100th Monkey Radio and all we do. It looks like Ramon's mic is busted, so we may not have much audio from him for the rest of the evening, but I'm sure we'll get something fixed pretty soon. So, condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance, and the love you deny is the pain you carry. We'll see you guys on the other side.